up, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Scout and Combine here on the Five Reasons Network on YouTube. Thank you guys for watching on YouTube and following along on Twitter Live. Today, I have Angelo Fantasy joining the show today. Angelo, what's going on, my guy?
Not much, man. A couple weeks until we got the combine, so I'm pretty excited.
I know it's a couple weeks, from the combine. Draft is coming up on the 28th, I believe. Is the 28th, 29th, and 30th. It's about 2 weeks away. And we're getting into like the big section of basically quote unquote what people call draft season. But for guys like us, draft season starts in the summer and it never really ends. It's just, a big cycle. It's a continuous cycle for everybody. But this time of the year is when the draft is heavily looked at by fans, by reporters, by analysts as well, because it's recent. It's coming up, and it's a big hype, man.
No, yeah, absolutely. I think it's one of those times of year now where, like last year, we didn't really get a scouting combine, right? We didn't get some of those type of surface level analysis that we get this year, right? We get to kind of look at prospects through the microscope. We've been looking at them for the past few years, so it's exciting, man. I'm really excited to see, especially what my Chicago Bears do on day 2 and how we can build around Justin Fields. But in all, I think it's a really deep class because of this is a COVID class, really, because if you think about it, a lot of these prospects didn't come out. They didn't have a lot of film, right? They didn't have a lot of film. They didn't have didn't have the big statistical years because of COVID, cutting seasons short. So I think this is going to be a really interesting class. I think all in all, it's a deeper class than I think we think it is. So I'm just really excited to see what happens on draft day.
I'm excited what happens on draft day too. And this being a Miami Dolphins podcast, we only got 4 picks in this year's draft. And especially, with the Tyreek Hill trade to Miami. Now, of course, I doubt that Miami's going to be able to draft a top wide receiver in this year's draft. And wide receiver was a big need coming into free agency, and they filled it up with Tyreek Hill and Cedric Wilson. Now, there's always few wide receivers that fall in the draft that become next level superstars, like a Tyreek Hill, like a Cooper Kupp. Now, we were talking a little bit before the show about some of the receivers we thought about it, and we came to a consensus like of this one player where like we knew immediately. Now, based on this year's class, who I thought it would be Sky Moore from Western Michigan, and I believe you have the same opinion as mine. So why don't you go ahead, delve a little bit deep into Sky Moore, why you think he'll have the biggest impact regardless of what team he goes to.
Yeah, absolutely. I definitely share that sentiment. I mean, for me, I believe that Sky Moore is one of the most underrated prospects in this whole class at any position. He's only played receiver for about 2.5 years, right? Came into Western Michigan as a defensive back as well as playing quarterback in high school. And then, right after switching to receiver, he had over 800 yards as a freshman. So that right there kind of tells you his ability to grasp concepts and literally run with them. So, I mean, for me, I'm a huge Sky Moore fan. I actually have him up in the big 4 in the same tier with guys like Drake London, Treylon Burks, and Garrett Wilson. I have him right below those guys, but same tier. And I think he can make an immediate impact, especially in the slot. I think with his accelerative capabilities, he's extremely good in space. He has really good feel for the position, despite not playing for very long at receiver. So for me, I'm really excited to see what he can do, where he's drafted. I think he has potential day one. A day one impact, and I think he could actually be a day one pick in the NFL draft if he goes in the late 20s to a team like Kansas City. I know they're talking to him, but that wouldn't surprise me.
Maybe like Green Bay as well.
Yeah, I mean Green Bay. I think they're like 22, a little early, but I think they can if they trade back. Yeah, I think that's something they can look at too at the receiver position. But I think Sky Moore is ready to make a day one impact in the NFL. I think with his, like I said, his ability after the catch. As well, kind of being that nuanced technician at the line of scrimmage, can really make some things happen from day one.
Yeah, so just my summary of him was that he was a little bit under the radar for many scouts and fans and analysts just because of his college career and when he played. like elite top speed at the combine, ran 4.41, right? Fantastic agility, just that acceleration combined with his natural soft hands. He's got really strong hands too, and he accepts the ball fluidly. And the thing is, he hasn't really been tested by a lot of top level talent, and so his production. Now, I know you don't draft based on production; you draft on traits. You don't know what his production will be like in the NFL level, but he doesn't necessarily have that ideal size. But put a guy like Cooper Kupp and Tyreek Hill in the NFL now, you're like, guys, these sides are actually successful now, right? He was recruited as a corner, which gives him a unique feel of the passing game. He understands zone concepts. He understands split safeties, deep zones, short zones, and how to operate in the middle of the field. He's a student of the game too, man. He's an excellent route runner, and when you just look at his athleticism overall, which you like to do, I know that since I had you on last year, you really talk about athleticism from a wide receiver standpoint. He's very fluid, and just his burst out of his hips, he's able to use that to flip his hips on a dime and make the defensive backs basically hesitate. And he uses that speed to stretch the field and breeze past defenders. Now, that trait alone is fantastic for yards after the catch and being a separator. But what about the possession ability Moore has?
Yeah, I think as like a pure possession receiver, I think we have the upside there because of like you said, you lose the strong hands. Yeah, I mean, this doesn't have anything to do with strong hands, but I think he measured on having the biggest hands of the NFL Combine, like bigger than Treylon Burks.
Yeah.
So, and that's impressive, right? For a guy who's only 5'10", 5'11", being able to have that type of hand strength, I don't think it has that big of an impact, but I think it's something where you can look at and say, hey, this guy has really nice traits, like physical traits. Obviously, his size isn't there, but he's going to be playing primarily in the slot. I think he has two-way capability. I think he can play Z as well, inside out. But he can contribute on all three levels, and that's going to be really important. He has the accelerative capabilities and top-end speed to beat you deep. He has the yards after the catch capabilities to beat you short. So for me, man, I think it's going to really come down to how he's utilized his landing spot. But I think he's like I said before, man, day one producer from the slot.
Right. Day one producer from the slot. And nowadays, NFL offenses, you always have – you're running more so in 11 personnel now, around, 25 out of 32 teams. Last I saw, 25 out of 32 teams utilize 11 personnel, just that slot kind of guy. It's just more so of a nuanced position. It basically took over that extra tight end in 12 personnel and completely demoralized the full pack position as well. So it's going to be intriguing to see where Sky Moore lands up and what his impact is going to be for the NFL team he's drafted with. Now, I was a big fan of Christian Watson early on in summer, especially around August time. I had him as a 6th-round pick just because of the rawness I saw, and it was so early on in the draft process. Now, with his him basically showing out to the world at the Senior Bowl, his combine performance. I talked to Trevor Sikkema. He was on one of the first episodes here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network here at the Scouting Combine. He said there's a huge potential that Christian Watson could be drafted within the 1st round. Now, we know what he brings to the table. Talk about his skill set and how does it project to the NFL level?
Right. I think Trevor hit the nail on the head. I think he has a chance to be in the early late 20s. I think a team like Green Bay, kind of needing that guy, now that MVS is gone, needing MVS plus essentially in that regard. But a guy like Christian Watson, you alluded to the rawness, right? He's a guy that hasn't developed much because of the scheme he was in college.
Right. It was mainly a run-first team.
Run-oriented team. Didn't see, we didn't see a large route tree from him. But what we did see is we saw the physicality. We saw him as a blocker. That was really important, I think, too, for NFL teams to realize he's a willing blocker away from the ball. We saw the ability to beat cornerbacks deep, get on their hip. and break down and do some of that stuff we saw at the Senior Bowl. So for me, when I look at that, it's the traits that I look at. Is he NFL ready right now to step in and be like a 600, 700 plus yard contributor? I can't say, but I don't think so just yet. But he has the potential in the right offense and environment to be a really good NFL player. And I think the threat of a guy like Christian Watson might supersede the actual physical capability of Christian Watson, which is okay. NFL offensive corners will take that all day because you have a guy on the outside that can score on any single touch, right? If he gets by, if he gets by the corner and there's no safety help, you can just put 6 points up on the board. You're not catching him. So interesting player. I think we're talking about better production in reality more than fantasy. But I like his skill set. I'm curious to see where he gets drafted. He's one of those guys that I circled to kind of see where they go. I think he's one of the better bets. I think him, Jahan Dotson, and Sky Moore, I think one of those three guys are going day one. I don't know which one yet, but I think the one with probably the most upside as an X receiver is definitely going to be Christian
Watson. Look, he's a fantastic 50-50 ball catcher, right? He's got that arm length, that leaping ability, and the catch radius to bring in those balls. He's got like a 77-inch wingspan. All right, it's big. Like, he's proven to be a kick returner. He can do the yak. He
also
can line
impressive
up
at his size for sure.
Bubbles, those screens. You can play in the slot. He's that big slot guy you want as well. That will absolutely he'll just obliterate the safeties basically over the middle of the field. He's an effective runner from the backfield. He gets open, man. And all a quarterback needs to do is toss a ball in his area, and he'll come down with it. He accepts the ball fluidly as well. He plays fast, confident. He's a fluid athlete as one. And the big thing is, too, Angelo, a majority of NFL teams run a zone scheme system, and he fits that system to a T. Look, he can sift through that oncoming traffic. He can be one of those high, low, then middle wide receivers. He can become that 3-level threat. He's got elite darting, stop and go acceleration, right? He's dangerous in the open field. We already know that. He can go into those creases and those cutback lanes as well. And he's a legitimate vertical threat. Now, obviously, I don't think he'll be a Miami Dolphin just because of where we're picking, unless we try to trade up for this guy. What team could really utilize his skill set to their full advantage?
I think the first team's the Green Bay Packers, 22. I think that's an interesting one. I think if Treylon Burks is gone, I think they do go that Christian Watson route. Makes a lot of sense, him or Dotson. I think the more upside is with Christian Watson, in my opinion, but I think that's a route they could go. The Chiefs as well. The Chiefs are someone, if he slides back into that back half the 20s, that could take a nab at him. But I think he honestly right now, if you're telling me like which one of those three guys, Watson, Sky Moore, Dotson would be first rounders, I'd take my money on Christian Watson.
I like Christian Watson as a player. I like Christian Watson as a person. So somebody underrated, and it's a Bruin prospect. Kyle Phillips is somebody I've been intrigued by, right? He's a legitimate vertical threat that I think the Dolphins could use, and his frame reminds me about Antonio Brown. Now, I wrote an article about Kyle Phillips, Khalil Shakir, and Tae Kwon Thornton, who we'll get to later on. Mm-hmm. He reminds me of now Dolphins wide receiver coach Wes Welker. What do you think?
I think it's kind of in that same vein, actually, but more like newer school, I would say.
Hunter
Renfro is the guy in that mold, I think, for Kyle Phillips. Few reasons. I think the most underrated ability with him is his ability as a punt returner. Mm-hmm. And that's really important when you're talking about these guys who are probably going to go late day 2, early day 3.
Right.
Is their ability to see the field from day 1. And that's going to be him because he's prolific punt returner. He's one of the best punt returners in this 2022 class, and there's some talented dudes there. So for me, I think that he's going to see the field from day 1 as a punt returner. I think he's also going to contribute as a spot producer in the slot during his rookie season and kind of grow into that role. Really good after the catch. Outstanding field vision and conceptual awareness when he's running from the slot and after the catch. I think that's really important when you're talking about a guy like that who's smaller in stature, might have a limited tree in the NFL, but can make things happen, find soft spots in zones, and give
Now, why do you
quarterbacks good
think?
throwing lanes.
No, actually, I understand why you think he has that limited route tree because of UCLA's. They're of course, yes, they're run first team, right? 100%. They are a run first team, but he kind of excelled in in that offense. Now, he wasn't that big time producer, but he handled those slot duties really well. And we talk about the geography. Look, he plays in the Pac-12. Not a lot of people stay up to watch Pac-12 games. All right,
Not a lot of people man.
Not a lot of people stay up to watch Pac-12 games, right? I think the one thing that I really grasped on early on was that he flashes the foot quickness and toughness to really handle those slot duties at the next level, and he also lines up all over the field. Now, I kind of yes, he might not have that route tree, but his route running, I think it's a legitimate weapon that he uses to take advantage of that scheme separation, like in a zone system, to create traffic for defenders. Now, they're like defensive backs, they're put into difficult spots with Phillips, right? He's difficult to predict as he understands how to use all phases of his routes. Now, he didn't run many routes, but the routes he ran well because of the reps he had. And in my opinion, it's because of his footworks. Like he does not allow a lot of wasted movements between the reception and the burst upfield. What have you seen when you watch Kyle Phillips?
Yes, some similar sentiments to that. I mean, I think for me, when I watch Phillips, it's the ability to immediately separate in and out of breaks. Really good through transition. He's just one of those players that is giving him a two-way go is a really big weapon. And I think that's why in the slot, you're going to want him working more on the short to intermediate areas of the field, giving quarterbacks sound throwing lanes, and making life easy. So I think for me in particular, I see him as a slot producer. I don't see him working out wide or wide too much, just like Hunter Renfro in that regard. You do the toughness too. I think that's a big part of his game. Watch him run block. I mean, they used him as a motion blocker sometimes around the goal.
They used him as a fullback too.
Yes. And at sub 190 pounds, he's out there.
He plays much bigger than his size.
Yeah, man. He's putting his nose into some linebackers. So I like his game a lot. I mean, I think a team that needs a slot receiver and a guy that can contribute as a punt returner is really going to like him. Personally, as a Chicago Bears fan, I would not object to having a guy like that, back there helping out Justin Fields because the Bears need a punt returner, A. And B, I think we do need a primary slot option, and a guy like Kyle Phillips fills that role. But I think he's going to be productive NFL player wherever he goes. He's going to be in the league for a long time. He's one of those guys that's going to just be consistently productive because of his skill set and the way he's going to make life easy for his quarterback.
I see him as an early day 3 pick, and I really, really hope that if the Dolphins do choose a receiver, it is him due to his special team abilities, his blocking ability, his slot capabilities, and he fits a run-first offense, which Mike McDaniel is going to try to employ. The next one, we talked about a little bit earlier, was Jahan Dotson out of Penn State, and he's become a fan favorite wide receiver in this year's class. What do you like about his game?
I think with Dotson, he's going to be kind of like Christian Watson in a way. He's going to be an immediate threat in the perimeter. I think he's that third-level threat that NFL teams love to deploy. He's going to give you that type of capability, that home run capability on any given down. That's really important. Really good hands, tough in traffic receiver. He does a lot of really good things. Better real-life production than fantasy production with a guy like that. But I like Dotson's game. And like I said, he's a guy that can sneak into the first round. I think he's a fairly NFL-ready wide receiver in terms of his route tree, the concepts he was asked to run at Penn State, and how well he ran those. And also, when he was the focal point of an offense, he did extremely well and shouldered that load. So for me, big Jahan Dotson fan in that regard. I think he can contribute from day one. Do I think he's a perennial 1,000-yard receiver? I do not, but I think he's going to be a contributor, especially on level 3 for an NFL offense.
Of course. Now, the big thing I saw with Dotson was that he made a lot of difficult catches look easy. It's like he uses like gum, just sticks right onto the glove, right? And you talked about he was a big play guy. And since the start of, I believe, either 2021 or last season, I guess, or whichever one you want to call it, he was tied with Olave, Devonta Smith, and Jalen Darden for the most 20-plus yard touchdown catches in the country with 11. Now, number one, I think it's because of his elusive footwork, his speed, and his acceleration. He was a former track athlete at the high school level, right? He won the state championships in the 4x100 relay, won the championship in the long jump, has won regional state titles. His acceleration is very, very quick, and he's able to reach his top speed quickly, which is why you want him as that deep play guy. Now, he does well around the middle of the field, those intermediate routes, because he's got good hands. But one thing I saw is that sometimes defenders, like better defenders in the Big Ten, were able to knock him off his route because of his frame. Do you think that is a concern?
No, because I think athletes like him can learn to work around that. I mean, I think we saw similar things said about Devontae Smith coming in the NFL draft last year, and he was a near 1,000-yard receiver on one of the worst passing offenses in the league in terms of pass rate. So I don't think that's as big of a concern because a kid like that who has a pretty broad toolbox, understands the game pretty well from my vantage point, will find ways to combat those type of things. So obviously size does make an impact, but I think
say, man, size does matter. Size does matter.
His accelerative capabilities and his top end speed are going to make up for that. I think DBs will be playing off him a little bit more because if he does get by them, gets on their hip, like I said with Christian Watson, man, you might look up and it's 6. So he's an important asset as a deep threat immediately, and he can probably grow into a bigger role. I think he's kind of like a Mike Wallace type of player in that regard, where he's going to live on level 3, but as his career progresses, he can become a bigger portion of a passing offense.
Okay, let's go ahead and talk about our top 3 receivers. There's a little bit of a difference within the final one. We have your first one is Garrett Wilson. Mine is also Garrett Wilson as well. Fantastic route runner. Okay, just an absolute fantastic route runner. Sure. Incredible deep threat with amazing leaping ability, sticky hands. The best part of his game. He's got one of the best hands out of this draft class. He's a great student of the game, puts in extra work required, and his coach, wide receiver coach, was Brian Hartline, who is one of the top wide receiver coaches in the country right now. Use it on deep routes. He got separation down the sideline. He gets it on the middle on those crossing routes. He extends his arms rather than just using his pure speed. He uses his body very, very well. And I wanted to ask you, like, his running style is just like jittery, right? It's not something that like I've seen before on tape. And the big thing is too, just that the way he runs, like I don't understand how he's got those tight roping skills down the sideline, how he gets in and out of his breaks. Like, what have you seen when he's running that differentiates from the rest of this draft class?
Right. I think timing is the first thing that comes to mind with a guy like Garrett Wilson. I have him in the mold of Deontay Johnson, just really complex timers in terms of routes, in terms of creating separation at all levels of the field and in all facets. We're talking about he's creating separation when the ball's in the air. He's creating separation with his boots in the ground early on in routes. So he's someone, for me, I think he's the safest bet to produce in the NFL. And that's why I had him number 1.
I know you want him as a Chicago Bear.
No chance it happens. He's going early teens, late 10s maybe. He might go, I wouldn't be surprised 8 to Atlanta if he goes there. He's that good, and he's that safe as a receiver prospect too. Big fan of his game.
I am a big fan of his game too. I think he's the number one wide receiver in this draft class, and if he's gone by top 8 to Atlanta, he might not produce so much within his first season in the NFL just because of their quarterback situation. Maybe with Chicago, he's got that repertoire and that chemistry with Justin Fields already. And then you would say if Garrett Wilson is gone, why not get Chris Olave, right? Yeah. He's already got that too. But comes back to both of our number 2 wide receiver. Yours is Drake London.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mine is Jameson Williams. So talk about Drake London a little bit, then we'll get into Jameson Williams.
Sure. With London, I think you get that potential for an Alpha X. And those guys matter from a physicality, play style, and also a schematic standpoint offensively. So a guy like London uses body really well. Like I said, really physical player. Love his hands, the catch point, extends. Former basketball player, got to mention it. But uses that type of leaping ability and inner athleticism when the ball is in flight to make really difficult catches look really easy. I think it was the game against Colorado when it was like a back shoulder fade in the goal, and he just went up there and just one-handed it and turned around, and that was that. So I think guys like him make that sort of work look really easy. This is a really interesting receiver class in that most of the top 5 receivers, I think 3 out of the top 5 receivers are dealing with significant injury. Like a guy like Drake London, obviously he has the foot ankle. Guy like Treylon Burks has the ACL in high school, and then has had some complications during his collegiate career. Then Jameson Williams, recent ACL tear. So it's a big question mark in terms of how these guys are going to perform in terms of longevity. But I think right now, Drake London is my wide receiver 2 on film, and I think it will stay that way. Then we get into Jameson Williams. To me, he's like Will Fuller. I mean, he's an absolute. You can look up, and he's 4 receptions, 185 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Like that could be very well. That's a Jameson Williams stat line in the NFL.
People compare him a lot to a Tyreek Hill, but I haven't heard that Will Fuller.
Yeah, I don't see Tyreek. I don't see this. Tyreek just has special suddenness, and Tyreek is also in a class of his own in terms of just pure accelerative capability and top end speed. There's no receiver, there's no player in NFL history that is Tyreek Hill. He is one of one. I think that's how it'll always be. But Jameson Williams he's a very good prospect in terms of the threat of Jameson Williams. Like defensive corners are going to need to know where he's at all times because he can take a slant to the house. Like he could take a slant to the house.
Monster ability to stretch the field vertically.
Exactly. And he has that vertical capability too. So I think he's really young. He's raw. But if he develops, he can be one of the NFL's premier receivers.
Right.
I think I have him probably wide receiver 5 or so. Wide receiver 4. I like his
more
game.
So due to that rawness though, right?
I think so. I think it's also, for me, when I'm projecting it, is I think he's going to be used at level 3 right away, and that might be it.
Right.
That's one of the reasons. I think also health. Wide receivers of his explosive capability, dealing with a serious injury like a torn ACL, that's a question mark in terms of coming back. A wide receiver I liked in last year's draft cycle, different type of receiver, but Tylan Wallace. He produced at a super high level during his freshman season, was going to be a potential first-round pick, late day 1, early day 2 draft selection, but then he tore his ACL, and now he's not the same player, and that's kind of the risk you take with Jameson Williams. The threat can only go on so long. You're gonna have to prove that, and that's a little bit of my fear. I don't think that will happen, but that's kind of in the back of my mind when I'm looking at Williams. That doesn't go into his draft ranking, but more so his ceiling and longevity in that facet.
Right. Now, something fun like I saw just like going through his routes from his start to finish of this route. Like he dominates at that start of the route due to just his explosive quickness and short area burst. Now, once you get to maybe within a second or 2 seconds, he's already basically 10 yards down the field, right? He hits that little ISO move, those little stutter steps or those jabs a little bit to isolate himself. Then, right, it's an art the way he runs his routes and tries to catch the ball. Like it goes right into his chest and secures it with his hands, and then boom, he's gone with that speed. former track star. He combines that speed, balance, quickness, vision, and those cuts to leave defensive backs and linebackers in the dust, actually. And he kind of compared a little bit similar to Jalen Waddle to me. Like there were a little bit of similarities, but I saw more so of like a Jerry Judy kind of guy, but just more explosive.
Yeah, I think from like a size frame standpoint, I definitely see Judy. But Waddle, I definitely see. I actually put that on Angelo Analysis of his mesh comparable is Jalen Waddle with his ability to re-accelerate in routes. Mm-hmm. And that's a rare trait. Like that's not something you see every single day from wide receivers. That's hard to do, and hard to do at the level that he does it at, as well as Jalen Waddle. So I think he's a fantastic prospect. I think he could end up being he could end up being the best receiver in this draft.
And there have been some rumors that he has a good shot at being the first wide receiver taken.
Same with remember when Henry Ruggs came out. I think that's the thing is the threat of that player is he immediately makes your offense a lot more vertical, and the threat of that offense being vertical is really important too. So I think that's huge. I would say the earliest is I think Jets. I think it's Jets at 10. That's what I could see. I think that would help out Elijah Moore as well. Take some heat off him. But that's not a bad trio with him if Denzel Mims gets it together. Right. Williams, Moore, Barrios as well, working in the slot, Moore as a Z, and then you have a rotational Williams along with Moore working outside a bit. But I think that'd be an interesting fit. I think with Zach Wilson's ability to push the ball down the field, that works out.
All right. The last guy you got on, and my last guy was Drake London at 3. We already talked about him. Yours is Treylon Burks. Now a lot of people are saying he's a bigger Deebo Samuel. Let's stop right there. All right. Let's kind of stop right there. Yes, he can line up all over the field. He could use snaps as the back. Right. Deebo Samuel is Deebo Samuel, man. This is Treylon Burks. Treylon Burks is Treylon Burks. All right. He's got great balance, great lower body strength as well. But the only knack I have on him is blocking. That's it. Deebo Samuel can block really well. I just don't see it with Burks.
Interesting. I saw a pretty physical blocker when he was asked to on film. I think it's the physical aspect is important. Having the capability is really important to do that. Just being able is a different story. I don't think that right now he's an NFL caliber, a blocker on an outlet essentially. If he's going to motion, he's not going to be asked to be the guy to block the linebacker, but not from a physicality standpoint. I think it's more so from a technical aspect. That wasn't something he was asked to do a ton of.
Okay. That makes sense. It's either you can't do it or you just weren't asked to do it.
Well, right. Exactly. Yeah. I love Burks in terms of, I thought last year, I think he was my wide receiver 1 coming in this year. With film and analytics combined, he's the wide receiver 1 in this class on AGS, which is important. But I think a guy like that just needs the right environment because he can be the best receiver in this class.
What would be the best environment for him? What team?
Green Bay. I think Green Bay or Dallas, I think would be the two I kind of pinpoint in the early 20s. For a guy like Burks, just because for a simple fact of the guys who are 6'2", 225 don't usually run 22.6 miles an hour.
Right.
But that's a big deal. He was kind of used in that jack of all trades.
Week three. I know the exact week you're talking about. Week 3.
Yeah, he was kind of used. He was in the jack of all trades mold where he's used all over the field. Very similar usage to like Laviska Shenault Jr. in his rookie season with the Jacksonville Jaguars, which actually worked out well for Laviska. Obviously, this last year with the Urban Meyer debacle, we didn't get to see all that, but that's what I kind of see him being. I think he's kind of a combination of in the mold of a guy like Demaryius Thomas, and then mesh with the alignment versatility of Laviska Shenault Jr. I really like his game. He has a lot of unteachable traits.
Yeah.
When we're talking about what we look for a wide receiver, a lot of that is what he possesses, but we miss on guys like this all the time because the combine wasn't good or you know what, he doesn't, not very nuanced route runner. Well, I think he was asked to be at Arkansas. Arkansas was a very, run-based offense, didn't complicate things in terms of routes. Jefferson is not an NFL caliber passer.
Now
So
this is where I get into the point where I'm like, maybe he's like an AJ Brown or DK
sure.
Metcalf kind of guy, right? Like when I see him run those nines, those goes, and those vertical routes, he eat up those cushions, very long strides. He's got that speed. He's got the frame. He's got the legs. He's got that hand size too, man. He's also strong, very, very strong. And he gets down the field before defensive backs can even turn their hips. Just that size, athleticism,
Mm-hmm.
and body control helps him to be that vertical guy like a DK Metcalf or an AJ Brown within those short yardage,
Sure.
short routes, those curls, those flats, and gain yards after the catch because he can. He's got that upper body strength and that tenacity to get down the field. He can deliver those powerful, like stiff arms on those defensive backs. Like
Right.
that to me is just so valuable, especially on those early, like second and long or third and short. Just give it to him and he'll get you that first down just
Right.
because of his body type, his lower body strength to get through those tackles. And he's got just an impressive run after catch ability.
Yeah, no, I think so as well. I think for me, a guy like Burks, I think is best deployed in the slot from day one, and then kind of branching him out to the outside. I think Slaughter Z's is going to be his best positions. I can't see him as a X receiver in the NFL. I think you just kind of take too much off the table in terms of his yards after catch capabilities. But yeah, I'd love to see him in Green Bay. I think that'd be a great fit with Aaron Rodgers. I think Aaron Rodgers needs a guy like that who can grow into a larger role, but has the capability of on day one being an after the catch threat and also helping him out in the red zone.
Now, as we move on from the fun part, we're getting to an either or. Two Michigan State wide receivers, Jalen Naylor or Tae Kwon Thornton. Who would you pick if you were a team?
Thornton, because I think the I alluded to this before and multiple times. Tae Kwon Thornton. I think the biggest thing is the threat of him is huge. I think he is a pure deep threat. I don't think he's going to be a very productive NFL wide receiver, but I think the threat of him will supersede his actual physical ability. Naylor, as I think, is an interesting one. I think he'll projects more as a backup Z slot guy, but I like Thornton in that capacity for sure.
Now, I wrote about him in my last article with 5 Reasons Sports. If you guys haven't read that, go ahead and check it out. He's 6'3", and he couples that with a 4.28 40 from the combine, right? And just that frame, it allows him to give him the ability to pluck the ball in the air over defenders with little to no contest, right?
Yeah.
And it makes him an intriguing option in the vertical passing game as more so compared to Jalen Naylor, where Naylor is speedy, he can catch, but he doesn't have the body type like Tae Kwon Thornton. All right. Now, in a wide receiver room, it's kind of like a basketball team. You want a different array of skill sets, and you can't have the same type of body type as in your wide receiver room. Can't have the same. You need versatility. You need a guy who can block. You need a guy who's speedy, and you need a guy, to be honest, that can do everything. Thornton is one of those guys that is a deep threat. He can be an intermediate and level 3 guy. Now, again, what makes him intriguing is that at Baylor, they were more so of a running team. They were a zone team. And he graded out, I don't know if you saw the raw score, at a 9.77. Just his explosion overall will help any quarterback that's looking to throw it deep. Now, the big thing I saw was that they didn't really utilize or capitalize on Thornton's skill set, which I feel like is going to hinder his stock and his value. Now, what that means is that an NFL team is going to draft him based on projection. Now, do you think that projection, just because of his skill set, what his intangibles are, do you think he'll go higher than what many people think?
I think he's a day 3 guy.
Okay.
I'd say early to mid day 3. I think is what we see with Thornton. I don't think he's UDFA, and that would shock me, just because of how he tested. I think he's a day 3 guy. I don't think he's going to be a number 1 option in the NFL, nor should he be. But I think he can help an NFL offense if he develops for sure. Kind of like Marquez Valdez-Scantling, like
Mm-hmm.
like that. That's probably my comparable for Thornton is a guy that can be productive in spots, but will never be asked or tasked with being the guy.
Right. Now, I put Thornton as an option for the Miami Dolphins. How do you see his fit in Miami with Tua?
I mean, they just putting a 4x1 together. I mean, that'd be insane, right?
That
So
is a 4x1.
it really is. It really is with Mostert too. Yeah, of course. I think that room with adding said Wilson too, that room is pretty full in terms of who's going to see the field from day 1.
Mm-hmm.
McDaniels might want to add a developmental prospect, and that would be Thornton, and that does fit what he's trying to do. I think as a potential X option, potential field stretcher, that does make sense. But it really depends on the development of Tua. Tua isn't known for pushing the ball down the field with consistency, right? Like Patrick.
And do you know why he's not able to push the ball downfield with that?
Right, offensive line.
Yeah.
But I also don't see that as his big NFL skill set. But I do think Thornton can help that offense down the road. Immediately, I don't believe so, but I think down the road he can help him.
Right. Now we'll move on to Beau Melton. Look, he was a highly coveted 4-star with offers from Michigan to Ohio State, Penn State, Oregon, and Notre Dame. Could have gone anywhere he wanted to, but chose Rutgers. Out of all teams, he chose Rutgers. Right? 5'11", 191. He's got a wingspan of 77 inches, almost close to 9-inch arms. He's quick, fast. He's got really, really good footwork, and he's got savvy route runner skills with top field awareness. And he sells those routes really, really beautifully. Now, what does he need to do to become a better all-around wide receiver, in your opinion?
It's tough. A guy like Melton, I think the number 1 thing is capital. I mean, if you gotta get the capital to show that you can be on the field. If you get day 2 capital, that's a great sign, right? For how the NFL views a guy like Melton. I think he probably gets early day 3, mid day 3 capital. With that said, you got to contribute on special teams. That's number 1 with a guy like that. Do I think he's a NFL producer? Hard to say. But he can. I think he could make his money in the slot in the NFL. That's the one thing I think about Melton. Being in the Midwest and watching a lot of Big Ten football, that's where I kind of project Melton. But yeah, I think he's a day 3 guy. He'll help you out in special teams if he can play special teams. That'd be huge for him. But yeah, just kind of seeing the field there and then growing his role.
Just grow into his role as a slot guy, as a special teamer. Like I have him right now as a 6th round.
Right. That sounds about right. I think he's a 6th, 7th round guy, UDFA potentially. Wouldn't be shocked to see him go earlier day 3 in round 5. But I think.
Could you see him in a Chiefs style of offense?
I don't know. It helps him. Honestly, with who they brought in. I mean, they're on Juju to be a slot guy, they're probably going to, if I'm them, I'm drafting one of the day 1 receivers that falls, and hopefully you can develop them. Because the thing with the Chiefs is they're never going to get a good enough draft slot to draft a high-level wide receiver. I think this class is deep. Next year, there's guys like Quentin Johnston who might fall in that late 1st round. But I think that's riskier betting on that. So I think they draft a receiver and help out Patrick Mahomes. But I mean, a guy like that just needs a shot. And if he can prove it in the preseason and prove it in training camp, and then I think he can see the field for sure.
Of course. I remember the Panthers drafted the LSU wide receiver last year. He did amazing.
Terrace Marshall? Yeah.
Terrace Marshall, yes.
Tough.
Did amazing in the preseason, and then just
tough. Yeah, I was pretty high on Marshall too, actually. you never know with guys like that where they have a lot of physical traits, big, fast, can work in the slot, good in the red zone. That was the number one thing I had on a guy like Terrace Marshall is really good in the red zone. I think I was like, he's going to help out whatever offense he goes to in the red zone as a threat there. But obviously with the Panthers, that didn't materialize. So we'll see what happens. Let's hope they draft a Pickett or Willis or someone to help out that QB room.
Right. Of course. Now we're going to go on to the two receivers who I thought maybe 2 years ago would be the bona fide number one and number two. George Pickens and Justin Ross. All right. Arguably, you could argue, like I could argue and go with you in circles all day and day that they're one of the most talented wide receivers in this class. The only thing, the knock on them is Pickens' ACL and Justin Ross's neck and nerve issues. Now, injuries are tough, man. Injuries are very, very tough. And it looks like Pickens was cleared at the combine, so I think he could potentially sneak into a day two. But Justin Ross, man, do you think he'll get drafted?
Yeah, I think he'll get drafted. A lot of upside with both. I think Pickens is a top 40 pick this year. I think his ability to produce at a high level as a freshman was really important in the SEC.
Yeah.
I like his game. I like him developing into a pretty good producer in an NFL offense. I can see him being even number one in the NFL offense. Am I concerned about the injury? Yeah, absolutely. I think any serious injury to a wide receiver prospect is difficult because of how many sharp cuts they make, their breaks, the speed of those, the startup capabilities, like building those back is harder than I think some think. Similar to Jameson Williams too, but you got like Justin Ross. That's where I'm really worried.
Such a smart player, man.
Yeah,
I'm
intrigued where the NFL doctors and medical staff see him. That's going to be the big tell of where he's at. Similar to last year with Tylan Wallace, we saw him slip into day 3, and we knew right then he's not healthy enough to be a day 2 pick. Talent wise, absolutely, but he wasn't healthy enough to be a day 2 pick. Justin Ross, I'm kind of fearing that same thing. Obviously, with the vertebrae issues as well as the foot, it might scare some NFL teams away. But obviously, the sky's the limit with Ross and his potential, and we saw that in his early years at Clemson. But how does the NFL view his issues medically, and is that something they want to take on and take a risk at?
I feel for Justin Ross, man. I mean, he was a nightmare in the open field. All right, I mean, as a freshman, like you're like, whoa, like this guy can be a potential star in college, potentially in the NFL. Like he was up there, man. 2 years ago, he was really, really up there, and then ACL injury, bulging disc, neck, congenital fusion, it's a big risk, man. It's a big risk. And I think without those injuries, he would be my bona fide number one wide receiver. He's 6'4", bro. 205 pounds. Excellent red zone target. Instinctive playmaker. Elite yak ability. Make plays all over the field. He doesn't have that breakaway speed, but man, it's tough.
I mean, just gotta see where he's drafted. Really, I mean, that's a huge tell for a guy like that to see medically where he's at for sure.
Now, do you think potentially the earliest could be a late day 2 pick for him?
Yeah, earliest late day 2 to undrafted. That's what we're really looking at here. I think he gets picked up absolutely by an NFL team, but I mean, we could be talking about a UDFA if the medicals don't check out as green as we hoped. But I don't think that happens. I think he's a day 3 pick.
Now, before we go, just want to shout out our sponsor for the show, Prize Picks. If you guys don't have Prize Picks, register now, man. Use the promo code 5 to get a 100% match on your deposit. Bet on NBA, NHL. They've got prop bets as well. Again, use code 5 to get a 100% match on your deposit. Angelo, before we let you go, man, do you see the Miami Dolphins drafting a wide receiver?
They have, what, 4 picks?
4
I don't
picks.
know about that. I don't think so, unless a guy really follows McDaniels that he loves. I'm going to say no. I think with the additions they made this offseason, I think their room is pretty set for 2022. I think 23 they could take a swing and get another tertiary guy. Obviously, guys, you have Gesicki, Hill, Waddle. Like, you have plenty of options there. And said Wilson too. I mean, you have a plethora of options for them to play around with. So, I don't think they draft a receiver.
If they do, though, who do you think would fit this offense as a potential developmental guy?
I'd say Tae Kwon Thornton.
Tae Kwon Thornton?
I'd say Thornton because I think they want to really open up their passing game and adding another guy who's such a size speed threat, essentially like a Quez Watkins type MVS type player. That's going to be important to do in terms of developing too, and also keeping Waddle and Hill open. That's important as well.
4x100 relay team coming at you in the next couple seasons, man.
Yeah, thing's nasty.
So how do you cover a team like that then? Like, have you seen anything like this before? Like, potentially getting, like, let's say Miami lines up with. We're also forgetting about Lynn Bowden Jr. too, man.
Right, that's right. Yeah,
you have, like, imagine like a Ferrari package of Jalen Waddle, Tyreek Hill, Ced Wilson, Lynn Bowden Jr., and Chase Edmonds.
We forget about Raheem Mostert. I mean,
Raheem Mostert.
He's the second fastest of the bunch. I mean, this is I haven't seen a Hill, Waddle, Mostert, the probably the fastest 3 trio I've ever seen in the NFL. I mean, it's ridiculous. But can those 3 produce at a high level is the question in that McDaniel system, as well as with Tua at quarterback. Remains to be seen.
Offensive line issues.
Yeah, so it's gonna be interesting to see what they do. But they have the physical talent.
Let's say theoretically, how would you minimize the impact those 3 players do? Like, let's say for a series, how would you minimize that in coverage?
I'm just like you did with Kansas City last year. Play too high. You play too high. Hope they can beat you on the ground. And that's one thing that the Dolphins couldn't do last year. Obviously, offensive line upgrades, McDaniel's system makes that a lot better. But still, I mean, I would take that over, getting beat by Waddle, Hill. The issue is too, I think, and we alluded to this before the show, Hill can play the Deebo Samuel role. He's going to get some carries this year. And I think that's something that we're not talking enough about, because when he came to the league, he was running back. He played
running back at Oklahoma State too.
He did. Yup. He came into the league. He played kind of that Deebo Samuel role, that wide back role as he coined it, with Kansas City early on in his career. And that's something too I think he does in Miami. Not to that extent, but I think he does do that and is a weapon out of the backfield as well.
Of course. Well, Angelo, man, thanks for coming on talking about these wide receivers this 2022 draft class. Where can our listeners find you at?
Well, first, thanks again for having me on. I really appreciate the invite, man. It was fun chopping it up with you. So you guys can find me on Twitter at Angelo_fantasy, or you can find me on my website, man. All my work is on there, AngeloAnalysis.com, man. So thank you again for having me on, man. I appreciate it.
Of course, Angelo, thanks for coming on, brother. As always, guys, Dolphins fans, I hope you guys were following along this podcast. The Dolphins were having a presser with Mike Gesicki, Austin Jackson, and Landon Roberts. You can find those tweets. Ethan was there at the presser tweeting along. So go on the timeline, follow 5 Years in Sports if you have not already. Subscribe to the channel as well. And if you can, give us a super chat, support the brand, support the podcast, support the website. We guys, we're giving you quality content every single day with not only with Miami Dolphins, but if you're a Heat fan, Marlins fan, Panthers fan, and even Inter Miami, and F1 is coming down here as well. So go ahead, subscribe to the channel, subscribe to the podcast as well. And thank you guys for watching. As always, guys, fins up, baby.